Welcome back. Before we went on the break, we were talking about the possible introduction of an eco-levy. I was just getting the sentiments of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers CEO. And now, Honorable Billow, I just want to know what the industry is saying about the eco-levy.
I want to just give a little bit of illustrate it a bit easy for the public to understand. We are in a third world country. Majority of the people use plastics. When you go beyond Nairobi into Kiambu, they're not going to use this glass to take their tea or coffee. They use plastic mugs, plastic plates, basins, buckets. This is what the whole country, jerrycans, water. Plastics is the life of that world country. So when you introduce, for example, in the industry where I am in edible oils, when we are buying a 20-liter jerrycan, an empty one today, it's about 230, 240 shillings. Because you import the raw materials. It's from outside the country. Then you introduce 100 and how much?
150 per kilo.
150. A 20-liter jerrycan is 1 kilo. So you're buying it now at 230, which is the cost, part of the cost of the oil when you're buying. Then you add 150. So that jerrycan already becomes 380. Then you've added 10% excise duty again in the same finance bill. So that takes it to over 400.
420.
Over 420.
Without content.
Without content. Then you're going to add, of course, the VAT and so forth. So the jerrycan alone is going to cost you over 500 shillings. Really. And out of that, the actual cost is only a small amount. The rest is all taxes. Almost 300 shillings is taxes. So how do you then really say, we are not responsible for the high cost of living? It's the government which is responsible for the high cost of living. There are things you can do. You don't have to really focus on these areas which affect the ordinary people, directly. These are some of the challenges we are having.
All right. And of course, now we need to hear from our analysts. They did call it a ridiculous proposition. Let's hear what they have to say.
So you know that, for example, in Kenya, and sometimes we are called the border economy. Why is that the case? Because we've created a lot of informal jobs or a lot of low-paying jobs as opposed to creating quality jobs or quality businesses for that matter, because businesses also give you income. So as long as we have that mismatch where the bulk of our taxpayers at the bottom of the pyramid, then we cannot fix that tax to GDP ratio in the way that it's supposed to be.
One issue that has been of discussion is the percentage of tax to to GDP. This is almost a key focus area for the government and maybe speaks to the reason why we have a lot of changes and a lot of introduction of tax. The question that begs is whether is it a viable move under the current economic situation that we have in Kenya?
Which then means that we find ourselves in a very interesting situation because then household debt is increasing. Talking to bankers right now, they're starting to feel pressure on that, personal debt portfolio because interest rates have been increasing, and which then means that your cost of, financing whatever debt you have has gone up. And so you have less to do other things with your income. So it means even if you had a mortgage or whatever personal loan you had, you have pressure to repay that. And then, on the other side, your income is not growing at the same rate. So that creates some, form of pressure on you as a household.
All right, that is what the analysts had to say. Two things I want us to concentrate on, Anthony. One, the border economy. That, for me, was a new concept. I've always, thought that, of course, our economy is pushed a lot by micro, small, and medium enterprises who might not have a lot of revenue generation ability, but border economy is quite interesting. And two, maybe let's talk about household debt, but let's start with the border economy. As the manufacturing sector, do you believe that your consumers, Kenyans, are within the border economy?
Yes, because if you look at the financial or the economic survey that was released by government, they said that the informal economy created 700,000 plus jobs, but created less than about 36,000 formal jobs.
Right.
So from that perspective, then you'd agree with the analysts who have said it's a border economy, because most likely these are border. Majority of them could be perhaps border and the small traders.
Right.
But even the question that I had when I was looking at the report, these are informal economy. How did you find out?
Right.
Where is the data? You know, how did you aggregate this data?
Estimated issue.
You know, these are estimated data.
Right.
You know, nobody can put a finger on there and say, you know,
this is the exact amount.
This is the exact number. And then if you look at the people who are employed in informal sector, they're talking about 19 million. And then in the formal sector has always been tethering around 2.9, 2.7 million. So if you look at that and say, who are these 19 million? Are they really employed, or is just an occupation to keep them busy?
Right.
Would you say the farmers who are farming for subsistence are employed? And I think when the president of Uganda was here, he's introduced a very good economy, perhaps not a border economy, is our people outside the money economy. I think that's the language you should be having.
Right.
We have majority of Kenyans who are not anywhere in the money economy. And I think that's where the challenge is. That as a manufacturer now, we have seen people now breaking bulk. So we talk about breaking bulk. You have a container load. But now if you go to the market without sachet and without, if you go to these kiosks in the settlements,
right.
You know, you need sugar. Someone goes with a bowl to get a kijiko of sugar.
Right.
A kijiko of cooking oil.
Right.
That is the economy that we're talking about. But it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
Because we should be talking about the opportunity. Instead of talking about debt to GDP,
right.
we should be looking at manufacturing to GDP,
right.
export to GDP,
right.
new economy to GDP in terms of growth, because collection of taxes is a consequence
right.
of the economic growth.
Right.
But it can only be the one metric that you're using is debt to GDP.
All right.
And by the way, we have spent a lot of time looking at where are these opportunities. When the government came, we looked at the plan, the bottom-up economic transformation, better model, and also we looked at where we are and our sectors. And we said, I think there's a nexus here. And we went sector by sector looking at where the opportunities are.
Right.
We have given proposals not once saying that if the objective is to create 1 million jobs, we know where the 1 million jobs will come from.
Right.
300,000 jobs will come from textile and apparel. 100,000 jobs will come from leather. And you ask Mheshimiwa, and it comes from a place where there's a huge opportunity of raw materials.
Right.
Leather. And I'll give you an example. If you go to Vietnam, I mean, all of us, I mean, maybe you guys were younger, but when we were growing up, you know.
Well, TV47 is largely Gen Z, so.
You know, Gen Z. So Gen Z may not remember that when we were watching the movies of Rambo, it was about Vietnam, you know, and when Vietnam was at war. Today, Vietnam is way ahead. I was looking at their GDP.
Right.
And it's almost, their export is like GDP of all the East African countries combined.
Right.
A country that was fighting a few years ago. But there's something that they've done. Policy.
Right.
And consistency.
And consistency.
Right.
We have worked with government to say, implement a national taxation policy. You cannot afford to attract FDI. You cannot attract DDI, what we call domestic direct investment, because that is usually the big one, not even the FDI. You know, by having a tax code that changes every year.
Right.
Is a recipe for disaster.
Right. And before we even delve into the national taxation policy, which is a sentiment that the manufacturing sector has been pushing a lot on the government, I have to get your sentiments, Honorable Billow. Maybe if you could just tell us, creating decent jobs, right? I feel like we have the equation the wrong way because we are focusing on taxing people instead of creating an economy where people are already thriving. Now, when it comes to this percentage that the government has been giving, can we say then that we could make plausible changes? Let's talk about solutions. How can we turn this around before the 1st of July?
Turn what around before the 1st of July?
Turn the bills,
the
some
bill,
of the clauses that we're seeing.
No, you see the bill, it depends. If you have a government that listens,
right,
which is critical. One of the things we've been advising this government since they came in is that please listen to Kenyans.
Right.
Because when you are listening, you are learning. So when if you have so many sectors of the economy here,
right,
he represents the manufacturing sector. Government needs to sit with the manufacturing sector and tell them, how do we grow the economy? What do we need to do to expand it up to 20%?
Right.
What do you want from the government in terms of creating that conducive environment? You go to the other sectors, financial sector, you go to the sectors, agriculture. This is the way to come up with changes. But when you simply sit down
right,
as government, that we know everything, and you come up with your bill without any consultation, this is why you found every sector has now written to complain about this bill. Every sector, from financial sector to manufacturing sector. I think literally everyone has been writing.
Sector.
Insurance sector.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it clearly tells you that there was no consultation.
Right.
They don't consult. And this is the failure in government. Because if you, then what happens now is exactly what happened last year. We gave Kenyans, in the public participation, gave their views, manufacturers, everybody. Thousands and thousands of people. Documents. For the first time, it was the most effective, if I use that word. Public participation. I mean, everybody knew about the finances.
Yes.
But what happened eventually? They just went ahead with what they want.
right,
Including the housing levy, where they moved even from levy and put it into law and said this is going to be a tax.
right.
So I mean, if you don't listen, then we can talk. We will present. We have, all of us, every sector has already presented their concerns. But you can bet that at the end of the day, we'll be lucky if some of the changes will be made. At least even the dumb ones, you can say this one it doesn't make sense.
Right.
You introduce 25% excess duty on crude palm oil or crude vegetable oil when you're importing. Then when you process it, refine again in the factory,
Right.
you pay another 25% excess duty. And some of these things don't make sense.
Right.
And so,
And you can't cross.
and you can't offset because they've removed also that section, offset on the excess duty on the raw materials.
Right.
So so you then wonder. So clearly, we're trying. They're trying. Every sector is trying to lobby the government that this is not right. So I'm only hoping they're going to listen. The
Right.
trouble is, once upon a time there was a government.
Right.
You go to Treasury. That's where the buck stops. Today, the government is run from so many centers.
Right.
You don't know.
Who is the biggest man in the room?
You don't know who to talk to.
Right. Right.
Like a dark room, dark cat, and a dark chasing a dark.
I've actually had of that saying. Now, of course, we're going to be going into the national taxation policy. I really would love to know what the manufacturing sector has to say about that. But let's listen to what Kenyans have to say about this particular financial bill.
Naposikia viongozi wakisema ya kwamba saa hii Kenya kiuchumi imekuwa, lakini unakuta katika households hiyo growth yote ambayo wanatuambia that not translate to the real life ambaye wananchi wanaishi.
Vile walikuwa wametuahidi kwa maisha yatakuwa chini. Ndio anatupromise eti ni baada ya muda tutaumia kwa muda tufurahie baadaye, lakini tutafurahia lini? Utakuja kufurahia ukiwa hali gani? Temi maybe nitakuwa nimeisha kabisa, biashara imeisha, unaniambia nitakuja kufurahia. Ni sahihi atusaidie maisha yashuke chini, badala ya kupandisha ushuru anasema eti tutafika 22%. Afanye bidii ushukishe chini. Sasa hivi in fact badala ya 16 hata angeshukisha 8.
Wananchi kusema kweli punda amechoka, kwa sababu ukiangalia hata kujikimu kupata chakula, tuseme kifungua kinywa, lunch, imekuwa ni ngumu sana kwa sababu mwananchi ana mzigo mzito, maana hakuna flow ya pesa. Wengi ni wale ambao wanaitwa walalahoi.
We find that those taxes are going high. Everything is being taxed. You tax even the agricultural commodities. I mean, you tax bread. You tax those commodities which are really used by the common mwananchi for their daily living. Basically, that one will impact the local Mwananchi negatively. So for me, this finance bill will really impact negatively to the common Mwananchi.
All right. That is what Kenyans had to say, and I'm getting a few reactions from the gentleman here. But before I even go to that, a few things that we must consider. The economy usually, especially the circulation of money, is most of the time, you know, it's affected by three things. I call it the trifecta. We have, of course, inflation, we have the dollar exchange rate, and we do have the base rate that is set for banks when it comes to loans, right? Now, what Kenyans are essentially saying is that, yes, we do see the taxation measures. We do hear that the economy is doing well. We're seeing that the dollar is going down. We're seeing that inflation is going down. We do see that, you know, the base rate, I don't think it has been touched. But we see all these things, but we do not feel it. Now, when it comes to this, and what the Kenyans have said, Anthony, what do you think?
You know, Kenyans, they speak from a very practical level. I mean, you do not need to explain to Kenya about macroeconomics, jargons, and inflation, and GDP. What is that? Because they wake up in the morning, they go to work, they get paid, they go to the shops, but the money they are paid is not able to buy their basic requirements.
Right.
Take an example of our salaries here, even including yourself.
Right.
If you do your calculation from pay, housing levy, NHIF, SHIF is coming, NSSF,
right,
all the levies,
Housing.
and housing, and then all the money you get, you spend in this country, you pay 16% VAT.
Right.
Your salary, if you're paid 100 shillings, you take home 50 shillings.
Right.
50 shillings goes with government.
All right.
All right? Now, people at home are expecting that you are working in a studio, nice studio like this one, and then black tax kicks in.
My favorite.
You are unable to even pay your household. You are unable to pay anybody. You have a side hustle, you have a M-Pesa shop. You can no longer pay because some of those things, you maintain them from your salary.
Right.
You cannot maintain the black tax. You know, someone has died, someone has a wedding. These are the things that Kenyans are talking about.
Right.
The worst thing that you want to see is a phone from home because you know, or from the village. You know what is all about.
Right.
And you don't have.
Right.
So Kenyans don't care too much about, and the problem is not Kenyans are not paying taxes.
Right.
And I keep on saying, everybody is paying consumption tax. Everybody is paying at least 16% VAT.
Right.
The problem is about the spending.
Problem is on the expenditure side.
The problem is on Kenyans.
Right.
Kenyans are paying taxes. We are paying up to 50, others 55% of our salaries. But then the expenditure, I'll pay 45%. I'll take my children to a private school. I go and pay. I'll go to a private hospital. I go and pay. I mean, then you ask yourself, what are you paying for?
All right.
That's where the problem is.
Right. I must get your sentiments, Billow. I see you nodding a lot, especially when Anthony talks, because I feel like all on the same page. What are your thoughts on what you just saw?
No, Kenyans have always, said exactly what Mwangi is saying, the reality on the ground. The problem with people in power is they always get out of reality very fast. The moment you get into those high places, then you don't touch base what's going on in reality. So you sit in those boardrooms and you think, well, you know, this 2-piece studio is making money. So if we charge them 3%, 10%, they should be able to pay. They don't even know what your returns are.
Right.
Maybe your returns are not even 3%, but they say you should pay 10%. The consequences, you end up closing. But I think the reality on the ground is that the economic situation in the country has not changed. You can say the price of unga goes down, but if the price of other things go up, the net effect is the same.
Right.
People are still struggling to make ends meet. There are no jobs. There's no free school. People are paying. Universities, everything has gone up.
Right.
Health is expensive. education. So when you are giving all this money to government and you're not getting service, then you're making the lives of Kenyans very expensive.
Right.
You've made the cost of living too high for them. So I think I agree with Kenyans. Those things which are published,
right.
the 6.5% growth, these are statistics which are done by some fellows in
right.
which we may not agree with, some of us. I don't agree with their figures all the time.
Right.
Because that's government. You remember when Trump was in office?
Right.
And then data on the employment was released, and we thought, no, that's spent it, and it's not. So anything can happen in these numbers.
Right.
So I don't think that is really. You're told your sector has grown by 20%, 25%, and you can see people have lost employment.
Right.
Hundreds of people have lost employment, and you've been told your sector has grown.
Right.
So the figures, I think, what Kenyans are saying is the reality on the ground. Things are bad. Right. And I think that's what matters most. Not because sometimes some of the sectors that are reported on for growth are the areas you would call the elitist sectors, like finance sector. Now, if you say the banks have made billions, and you say the banks have performed, so I mean, you would not in reality then be talking to what those guys are feeling. They're the ones who are paying all that money.
Right.
The loans have increased. When this government came in, the treasury bills and whatever, 8-9%.
Yes.
8%.
Yes.
Today they pushed it up to 18. They're the ones who are responsible for the cost of finance by the banks to go up to 25, 26.
Right.
So making things difficult for people. So government must know every action they take, it impacts on the cost of living of Kenyans.
Right. Usually my generation says kwa ground vitu ni different, so maybe what is being reflected is not what is happening kwa ground. Now as we start to conclude this particular conversation, gentlemen, I just want to get your final sentiments. I think I'll give you a minute each. What are your thoughts, of course, conclusively on the finance bill? What could be done to change it?
I think if it goes as is, the outcome is going to be the same as 2023.
Right.
We said steel, cement, paper. We have seen actually companies relocating.
Right.
We have seen exports dropping from high number to zero.
Right.
Now, the levy that they introduced, that export levy, if you look at how much they have netted for the whole year, is not even equivalent to what one company was paying in 1 month.
Right.
But that company now is paying much less because they cannot produce. So what we're saying is that this is science. It's not abracadabra.
Right.
We have given proposals. The proposals are with government. We will rehash those proposals because we want to be helpful. We want to be useful. We will go give our views about the bill and give an alternative view and a proposed solution so that then the economy can grow. If the economy does not grow, we'll just be going round in circles.
Right.
Yeah? And we'll not even achieve. KRA has missed their target by 300 billion. We did the numbers, we went and say, I want you to look at this sector, this sector, this sector, and we have an alignment with the KRA.
Right.
That the reason they cannot meet their target is the impact of the Finance Act 2023. As simple as that. PE is down, VAT is down, import duty is down. All the indicators are blinking red.
Right.
And it's not a surprise. We told them.
We have the solution, but are we putting it to practice? Honorable Billow.
No, just to illustrate that point, I don't want to do anything
Right.
else, but I want to illustrate with the edible oil sector.
Right.
I can tell you for a fact, if this bill goes the way it is, 13 factories with investments nearly 100 billion, with 10,000 direct employees and up to 30,000 indirect employees will shut down. And if you look at the entire value chain, with the packaging industry, transportation, the soap industry, the confectionery, everything that, it's up to 100,000 employees. Right. So you're killing industry completely because you're looking for, and this is a sector that is contributing now to 40 billion. You're not only going to lose revenue, but you're going to make Kenyans, pushing them, impoverishing them because of some of these things which are not being thought clearly. So I think the government needs to really look at this bill and remove some of these things completely. They don't make sense. Absolutely, there are better ways of generating revenue, and so. But the impact the impact trying to get a 2-3 billion, you end up killing industries that would have generated you 40-50 billion. So I think that they need to remove some of these things completely.
Right. The analysts did say a preposterous proposition. We will see. 1st of July will be a few weeks away, and as we wait for that, of course, this concludes this conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of The Marketplace. Next week, we will be tackling something almost similar, but maybe a bit different. And thank you, gentlemen, for gracing our screens tonight. But from here, it's a good night. Have yourselves a very lovely Wednesday.